Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Business and Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Guttman. Really excited about my guest today, Robin Kuehne. Did I say that right? Yeah. So founder and CEO of NeoScience, Inc. 5000 company. Congratulations. And an OG in the cryo space. I mean, I think back in, was it like 2009? So over 15 years ago. Did you bring the first one to the U.S. or one of the first ones to the U.S.?
It's a famous argument. So I say one of the first ones.
Okay.
There was a place in Rosedale, California. They had an electric chamber. I think back in the day it came from Ecotech. I'm not sure. A U.S. cryotherapy franchise. At the same time, we had imported one, a nitrogen-powered one. So it's about simultaneous opening, I would say. But we were the first kind of a medical wellness center.
Right. So the first med spa to ever have. You're right. And I think famously, Kobe Bryant came over to your living room or something like that. Yeah. Were there other famous athletes that you worked with early on, or?
Yeah, there was a number of people came to our house. And our house was literally living room, like you just said, right? It was a duplex in Hancock Park here in Los Angeles. And we just popped the machine in our living room and got a nitrogen tank and just kind of introduced it. But we were introduced to Kobe Bryant and then a few other athletes, which eventually allowed us then to open a retail store. But it was really just people coming in to try it. And it was, something very almost like underground, something cool to do.
Yeah, cool to do, right? No pun intended, right? Yeah. Well, so I wanted to, part of what I try to do on the podcast is a couple of things. Obviously, I want to get into the wellness and biohacking stuff and what you're doing at NeoScience. But I want to start a little bit further back, if that's okay. Kind of like what kind of drove you to be an entrepreneur in the first place? I know you have a brother you went into business with that was a doctor. Obviously, how old were you when you came over from Germany?
When I came over, I was 19.
19, okay. You came over for school or?
Came over to volunteer. There was a draft in Germany at the time, military service. So I could choose a volunteer or, spend a year in the military. And I found a loophole to go to California. So
okay. Yeah. California's nice.
Yeah.
So maybe talk a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey and what drove you in that direction.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, I ended up being in school here after my volunteering, went to Santa Monica College, UCLA, and then business school, Pepperdine. But there was a little detour in there. So when I started school, the goal was to go to medical school. That was, the goal, the dream. And during that time, my brother's already a physician, is when the whole cryotherapy topic came up. And we're trying to find it in the US and couldn't find it. And so that sparked the idea of, hey, why is this not here? We should bring one over. And that eventually derailed my plans to go to medical school because I got a taste for business. But even before that, in school, we had like a couple of smaller businesses, from selling electric scooters out of our garage in Hermosa Beach or selling a product online, So we had a couple of businesses before. And so I realized I'm not cut out to be a doctor. I think I'd rather go another way.
Now, were either one of your folks entrepreneurs? Was there a mentor or some influencer that, kind of not influencer, but, someone who influenced your journey at all?
Definitely not my folks. Both were educators, teachers in the art world. My dad was an art professor and eventually a high school teacher. So not their, I would say, mentor. When I came to LA, I call him my godfather. He's not really. He's a guy who created Inspector Gadget, the cartoon character. His name is Andy Hayward. And seeing his world, very creative world, definitely an entrepreneur, built multiple businesses. That gave me a taste of, wow, what's possible. I think that's the biggest influence I had, I would say. But nothing to do with equipment in that world. That was more like, something that came easy to me and I was interested in. And it kind of was still medical, but not me being a doctor, but rather me working in the, field of health.
Well, I was at A4M. I don't know if you went this past year, but I went to Vegas and I'd never been to a wellness conference. I mean, I walked the floor 6 hours a day, 2 days in a row, and I didn't get to every exhibitor. Like, it was massive. But the thing that struck me that was really interesting was how much bullshit there was there. It's like everyone's making these crazy claims. Yeah. And like part of the thing that I'm trying to do with Titan Arc, with the longevity business that we just launched, is trying to figure out like what the best in class testing is. So like, what's the best test for mitochondrial performance? What's the best test for gut biome and things like that? And so I thought, well, hey, I'm at A4M. What better way would there to be to figure out what the best gut biome test is than to talk to people that do, pre and probiotics, because that's literally what they do. They're supposed to improve gut health, right? And I would talk to 6 or 7 different companies, and they would tell me different tests that were the right one, right? And all the other ones are crap, and this is the right one. And they would all tell me different ones. And then same thing when I was looking at a lot of companies, talk about improving mitochondrial performance. I'm like, who better to talk to about what the best test is for mitochondrial performance than someone who claims to improve it? And they were like, yeah, there really isn't a great way to test to test for mitochondrial performance. And I'm just thinking like, wow, it just seems like very, very messy and noisy. So I'm curious how you view that, given that you're in that wellness space yourself.
I couldn't agree more. At the last CryoCon, I gave a talk in a small room about the kind of the, I think the first slide said our industry started with a lie, right? Because there are so many misconceptions and so many things that people claim. And I think the biggest problem is that we don't have regulation in our industry. And so I can make a claim and there's nobody who slaps them in the hand for it being wrong. There's no consequence, right? I mean, you even see that there's no consequence of like people selling devices, going under and filing bankruptcy and then come back with a new company. Like you see that happen. But right. Biggest thing is that with equipment, right? I could say my red light device has an irradiance of a crazy number that I come up with, and there's nobody who says anything and tests it, which I find ironic because you could do this on your own. I always joke about cryotherapy chambers because that's another area where I feel like it's completely exaggerated. I always joke with clients like, hey, if you can go into a cryo chamber with a thermometer from Amazon, $200, and if you get the reading on the thermometer that they claim, I'll give you $1,000. Because it's never going to happen, right? I think the biggest problem is like it's just marketing. People try to outcompete each other.
Yeah.
Claims start getting bigger and they grow bigger and bigger and bigger. And there's nobody regulating it. So I wish there was somebody regulating this, And I'm not talking about FDA. It's a whole different conversation, what people think of the FDA, but there should be somebody verifying and regulating this. And I spoke to Lars of CryoCon about this. He's looking to possibly do something like this in our space.
Well, because even like a lot of the supplement companies, they'll say proprietary blend, which means you can say anything. When you do actually do third-party testing, what they say is in the product isn't in the product. There are things in the product that they don't tell you is in the product. It just seems like a complete mess. Well, so in an environment like that, and in fact, when I was at A4M, I can't tell you the number of booths I went to where they would say, well, we can't say it cures cancer, but we have a lot of people that had cancer that are doing better. Like, it feels like you just said you're curing cancer.
Yeah.
So like, I'm trying to compete in a space where that's going on. How do you do that?
Well, I think for red light therapy, I think we have a database of like 6,000 plus studies. And the funny thing is always I see websites where people post 6 studies to support their claim. But if you actually read the study, half of them say this is inconclusive, more studies are needed, right? But the study title sounded cool. So we don't expect people to actually read it. But I think there's enough research on red light therapy. And if you follow certain people and read research, obviously mitochondrial health right now is probably the biggest topic, right? There's urolithin A, there's all these different the products and red light and so forth. But yeah, it's hard to filter through and to really, So as I say, for us, I would say for red light, I would base our claims on whatever studies have been published that have been effective. And then my biggest thing is to verify that we deliver the dose. I think that's all I can do on my end, right? Because I can't do a double-blind study, plus it would be biased if I did it. But at least if there's a study that says red light worked for XYZ, then I can at least say our device delivers exactly this. And here's a lab test, or I verify this a lot when people come to our office, right? I take a meter out and I put a light meter on the device so that they see the number, me doing it live or on a Zoom call, rather than just putting in my brochure, it has XYZ. Right? So there's certain things we can do to help navigate this, but it's tricky. You're right.
And so, but when you have competitors that are unscrupulous and they're wanting to claim things that are not true, how do you combat that?
I think having done it for so long, and I think by having a reputation of doing the right thing and having integrity, I think that's what matters. And again, I always say during calls, I don't have the coldest cryo chamber on the market. There's a few that are colder. But what people need to realize is the difference in that temperature might be 10 degrees, not 100+ degrees that people claim. So I usually try to be very transparent and educate people in terms of cryotherapy example is, I'm not fighting on temperature. I'm competing on the end result. If Dave goes into my cryo chamber, how much can I drop his skin temperature? And how does he feel afterwards? And what does he report back to me? That's what matters, not how I got you there.
Yeah.
So I think that's how we can do it.
No, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot. So now you started in the service as a service provider, then you became a distributor, and now you're a manufacturer.
Right.
So maybe talk a little bit about that journey and why you decided to go from service provider to distributor to manufacturer?
It was a necessity, actually. It started as a necessity. So we had imported, like I said, this machine. The first one came from Eastern Europe, the Ukrainian, Russian machine. And then we moved to Poland. But the issue was always this. You import a machine from Eastern Europe. You don't speak the language. You don't have proper training. You have no support team that you can call. And so we were left hanging, having a retail store at this point, and the machines would break somewhat frequently. So we had to fix them. And we would sometimes sit there with hair dryers, de-ice the machine in between customers. You would literally hear the hair dryer go beep. And it was really a headache for us. And it was very frustrating because we didn't have electrical diagrams. You couldn't fix it. So we started improving these machines and then asking the factory, hey, next time we order one, can you do this and that? And we kept doing this until at one point we're like, they didn't even want to do all the changes we wanted to do. So it's okay, we're getting pushback by trying to help this company. We should do our own. And that's what happened. So then it's somewhere like, why are we dealing with this? Like, import costs and all these things if we can actually do it on our own. So that's kind of what happened there. So we became a distributor for a long time, supported the product, sold hundreds of machines. And then at some point realized that we should just do our own from the ground up.
And in the first cryotherapy machine, if I remember when I was prepping for today, I think there was either you or someone in your orbit had an injury, and that's why the cryo thing in the first place, right?
Yeah, I mean that was part of it. I mean, we were looking for it, after like a snowboarding injury, but we had also, my brother had seen it before in Germany, so like we're seeking this technology, and my sister-in-law at the time had done a broadcast type thing with one of these machines by coincidence, so we knew it existed, we had seen it before, and then we're seeking it in the US, and that's when we're like, okay, this would be great to have now. It doesn't exist. Why doesn't it exist? Can we get one? And that's kind of how we were like, okay, let's contact these companies and see if there is somebody who's willing to sell one, and so that we found one that had just, actually brought one over to the US trying to do something with it. So we took it over. So it was a real, like, it was the right timing at the right, the right place, right time kind of type of thing.
Well, I remember, I've known Kelly Carden now for, God, probably 15 years. And I remember, kind of trying to be helpful to her when she was opening her first couple of locations back when you could charge like $80, $90 a session, and have no problem getting that. And those businesses were wildly profitable. But then, obviously it pivoted to like, now you can't just do just cryo. At least that's my experience. You've got to do more, full, you got to do, lymphatic drainage, you've got to do red light, you've got to do hyperbaric, all the recovery stuff. It seems like most of the innovation, and it's interesting because it's not true in so many other domain areas, but it seems like when it comes to this wellness longevity stuff, a lot of the innovation is happening outside of the US. Why do you think that is?
I think these technologies have been around for a long time. And I think in the US, things catch on fast when people see a way to monetize it. That's usually what it comes down to, right? I think people are more entrepreneurial here and see big picture, how to can grow a scale of business. I think the Europeans are much more conservative when it comes to this. And I think technologies get developed further in the US, right? Because the cryo chambers came nitrogen-based out of Europe, and companies have been around for a long time. But I think now once it hit the US, companies here grew very fast.
Right.
But why does it start elsewhere? I don't know. We don't have lack of innovation here. That's not the problem, but I think it's just people possibly here, the official route would be if you have a product that has anything to do with health, people try to go the FDA route and it gets slowed down. That has maybe something to do with it.
Okay.
While in Europe, you have similar problems, but not as much. And so what usually happens is devices get brought over here and they're kind of in the between, right? Gray zone. It's a medical device in Europe, like lymphatic drainage, for example, with Max 2. Medical device in Europe, we bring it over here, we have to classify it as wellness and start selling it. And usually what people then do later on, they start with regulation. So we do with the red light bed too, right? We start building it, and then after we started selling them, we could afford to do the whole FDA thing and the whole UL, all these like certifications, because it costs a lot of money. So maybe that's something that slows down innovation a little bit.
So at NeoScience, you started with cryo, and then you went into did you do red light next and then lymphatic, or what was the order?
The first company was Cryo Healthcare. That's the retail store we're talking about. And we had that, it's still in business today, but I was part of it for over a decade. And then during that time, we split it into two companies, Cryo Machines, and then only building cryo chambers and working as a distributor. And then NeoScience was about 6-7 years ago when I decided to, venture out from the family completely on my own. And I realized I don't want to have a cryo name anymore. And I've been telling these business owners for years. They come to me, it's like, hey, Robin, I want to open Cryotherapy off Wisconsin. Shout out to Lane. That's his business back in the day. I know, but, and so I'll be like, I wouldn't do that because you're kind of putting yourself in a box, right?
Yeah.
And I know it's easy for marketing purposes. Cryo is a buzzword, but don't name yourself cryo. Be more open.
Yeah, it's funny, Lars, Kelly, and I from CryoCon, this will be the last year. It's CryoCon. If they told you, well, we're going to rename it WellCon just because, for that exact reason.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is, again, you can't be a cryo. So how do you decide, hey, look, let's go into red light next, or hey, let's look at lymphatic. What is it that there's, something's really successful over in Europe and you want to bring it over here? Like, what's the driver of what you decide you're going to do next?
So yeah, great question. So how we started, so NeoScience started with the Neo light bed. That was our first new product. Because I was doing cryo, but I didn't have my own. I was reselling for other companies. And I had been introduced to the red light years ago, like 2015, 2016, 17, which was at the peak of our cryo sales. And I would run into a lot of professional organizations and they had these NovaThor red light beds. And customers would always ask me, hey, Robin, we want to get a cryo chamber from you. What else should we get? And my answer was, for the longest time, I saw this NovaThor thing at whatever sports team, the Mavericks have one, you should look into that. And people would come back to me like, Robin, that thing is $130,000. Like, that's really not, your cryo was 50 at the time, right?
Right.
And so I kept having this conversation over and over. And then somebody's like, we got to get our hands on one of those and see what they're all about. And so we bought the leading devices, opened them all up, checked out what they were all about, and then designed our own. And my whole goal was, I want to offer this at a lower price point. And I'm not trying to say like, I want to do the discount equipment.
Right.
I think that's not my mission. But the problem I see with the device that's $130,000, what I always saw is the business owner would now charge the end user $100 to use this. The problem with red light, cryo, and all these modalities is if you don't do it frequently, it's not going to work. It's not going to do anything. So you have to have a protocol over a period of time. And if it was cost prohibitive, people wouldn't do it. And then they wouldn't get results. The business owner would not get repeat traffic. So the whole thing kind of spiraled down and collapsed. Right. And it started with an overpriced product. Now, again, and so my goal was, okay, how can I now put multiple devices together that we not only teach on education, we can talk about is a whole big thing for us, but how do these things work together? How do we teach the stacking of these things, protocols, so that when you walk into a wellness center, they don't say, hey, Dave, you should try this red light thing. It's great for you. But where people actually ask you specific questions and you get a protocol catered to you. And then how can I make this affordable, right? So for me, it's not a one hit, like somebody buys a machine from me and that's great and we make money and we move on. The goal is like, how can we support them and have them maybe get multiple things and really, build a wellness center. And that's, like you just said, like, a wellness center that's more comprehensive. So that's kind of the whole goal.
Well, so how do you think about it? Now, so you're not involved in any retail locations directly anymore, right?
No.
But I'm curious how you think about it, like, because you've got cold plunge, sauna, infrared and non-infrared sauna. You've got lymphatic drainage. You've got obviously cryo. You've got red light. You've got all these different modalities, and I guarantee if I were to ask 20 experts what the right protocol was for a particular person, I'd get 23 different answers.
Right. Yeah.
And so how do you think about that? So let's say a friend or family member came to you and said, hey, look, I'm really trying to maximize my recovery and longevity and things like that. How would you advise someone to think about what the right protocol for them would be?
Well, one, it depends on what they're trying to do. Obviously, right, if they have any kind of medical condition or it is really just for health, well-being, enough to say if they're, in my case, like in their mid-40s, someone really active type thing. I have my favorite technologies that I think have the biggest impact. Actually, give you a little side note. I had an awesome call half a year ago. I had a conversation about somebody wanted to buy multiple devices from us. And the person asked me on this call, Robin, if you had to choose one thing, one of your machines for the rest of your life, and that's all you can do, which one would you choose?
Right.
Oh, this is the greatest question I've ever gotten because I identify as a cryo person. I love cryotherapy.
Sure.
But I always feel like cryotherapy is very great for the acute, for the recovery. For if you have pain, I can make your pain go away fast. Not permanently, but I can offset. But the most profound impact that we offer, I would say, is red light, and then possibly followed by hyperbaric, like for real healing of the body. Because again, Gary Brecker stole the line, the presence of oxygen is the absence of disease. Right. Great line. But I think red light is the most profound because it affects every cell, every tissue of your body, and it improves their function. And so if all your cells improve in every tissue type of your body, everything improves, right? From your eyesight to your hair growth to your skin health to your muscle recovery to your healing. I think that's the most profound, right? But now if you combine these things, you can amplify this even more, right? If I add more oxygen for hyperbaric and then do red light, I have even more oxygen that I can bring into your cells, right? So there's a stacking there. So I would recommend to somebody, depending on how much time, money they willing to spend, first of all, and then I would probably start from the top down. And I would probably, hyperbaric might not even be one of my top choices because of the cost and time involved.
Right.
If you're busy, hyperbaric, big misconception is too, you do it once a month and it's going to be great for you. I see this in wellness centers. It rubs me the wrong way every time I hear this. Because if you go once a month to do hyperbaric somewhere, you're literally burning money. But if you did the hyperbaric 20, 40, 60 times over X amount of weeks, that's when you're going to notice dramatic changes and it helps you, right? So anyway, so I would look at that. What's the budget? What's the time frame? What are they trying to get? But I would say red light is going to be always at the very, very top unless you have acute recovery needs. Cryo is always right there. But there's so many great other things, but things that we also don't do.
Right. Well, so with red light, so I have my wife and I have the platinum LED panels. We've had them for about 5 or 6 years now for home use, right? Honestly, like I don't even know enough to be dangerous when it comes to red light. My wife uses it almost every single day. I use it, usually a couple of times a week. I don't even know what the right dose is. I don't, and it seems like they're not all the same. Like I know they're not all the same. So how does one even know which equipment's the right equipment, that it's actually giving the dosage you're supposed to get, and then what's the right protocol and frequency of for the average person?
So the one thing is that there's no bad LEDs. I always have this conversation. People say, well, my LED is a medical LED. And I swear if I take 2 LEDs and they measure both, they're not going to see which one is the medical LED. What's important is that it's the right frequency and the right power. That's what matters. To answer your question, so one thing about home red light, I always encourage people, if there's one rule of thumb is, whatever they advertise how long you should use it, double the time. And the way you know that you're close enough to the panel, because the further you're away from the panel is an inverse square law, right? If with every foot you go away, it exponentially gets weaker. So where you see a beautiful model posing 6 feet away, they look amazing on Instagram, but they have no therapeutic benefit, right? So my jokes are always, that you're close enough to the panel when you're kissing it. So get that close to your panel, unless it gets hot and you burn your nose, then don't, scare your face. Be as close as you can, twice as long as you can, like twice as long as recommended.
Okay.
And then obviously if it's a panel, then flip around and do it from both sides. It's not going to penetrate your whole body.
Okay.
And that's a good rule of thumb. Obviously you can get fancy and get light meters. You can buy a cheap solar meter on Amazon. The problem with the solar meter, it's going to read about twice the power than what it actually is, because it picks up all kinds of other information. So you buy a solar meter, you measure your panel, and then you divide it by 2, and then you plug it into the formula on our website. On NeoScience.com, there's a dose calculator.
Okay.
And that will help you to feel like, okay, if I have my panel, it has an irradiance of, let's say, 20 something, I know I need to do it for so and so many minutes. But you have to do it at the distance that you measured. Right, so it's a bit scientific, but it can be done. We have a $5,000 light meter that I don't like to just send out to people. I've done it before, but I don't like to do that. It's not.
And how about how often should someone do it? So so as close as possible without burning yourself, twice as long as as it says, once a week, 5 times a week, every single day.
So, people usually say like up to 6 times a week to give your cells a day off. Not sure that really comes from, to be honest. I would say as much as you can. Like if you can do it at least 3-4 times a week. So it comes like one of those every other day type scenarios.
Can you overdose on red light?
Very hard.
Yeah.
There is in theory like this biphasic dose, they call it, right? Like too little doesn't work, too much can have like cause oxidative stress. It is a very long flattened bell curve, so you would have to spend hours on it.
Okay.
I mean, our light bed, for example, like it'll shut off after 30 minutes. Like it won't even allow you to go beyond because ours is very powerful. But even that, you're never going to burn yourself like in a tanning bed. Like there's no danger. I mean, think where we take sunlight, we filter out all the bad frequencies, and we give you those that have a health benefit and give you those targeted. Have you ever spent that entire day out in the sun? Yeah. Yeah. The worst that was probably for you was the UV light.
Right.
That's the only thing. Like,
and so the other issue is the different red light, panels and beds have different frequencies, right? And everyone claims, so well, we have 10 frequencies, we have 12 frequencies, we have 9, 12, 16 frequencies. Like what's legit? What's the real thing people should be thinking about?
So red light, let's just focus on red light. We also do blue light for acne, green light for melasma, but let's focus just on red light. So it's usually a combination of red and infrared. The visible red light that you have only works millimeters into the skin. It's for the outside, for the surface. So, all these red light face masks and things, the red visible light is think of red light for your skin. You don't see the infrared light, and that's the real beauty. That's the one that penetrates deeper into the body, and different frequencies can go to different depths, which is why we have 3 infrared an hour bed. So we have a higher chance, kind of like a shotgun approach, right? I don't know your body, how much muscle mass, how much fat do you have versus me versus the next person. So it's just a kind of a broader approach. Of course, you could have 10 frequencies, but there's also a limit of, again, you're losing power for each frequency if you have too many, LEDs and divide it up. Mm-hmm. So we tried to focus on the ones that are most studied, which was like an 810, 850, 940, for example. And I know those get to go to different depths. So I have a higher chance to reach your cells. You could do 10, 20 frequencies, but again, there's no point. Also with red, there's always this argument, 660, 633, 640, which one is the best? And I think Michael Hamblin is like the professor who studied red light more than anyone. Like he dedicated his whole life to it. He said it doesn't matter. Like his cells can't distinguish between, there's a red spectrum that really works well. And even if you have a red product that says 660 on it, it's a curve. Like you get you get anything from 640 to 680 at 660. You don't just get one.
Right.
So it's a spread. So I would say don't overthink it, don't stress it. But for the infrared, it's great to have multiple frequencies. And ideally, again, it has to have enough power. And that's the hardest thing to measure.
And so back to the question I was asking earlier about mitochondrial performance, like are there tests that you think are good and accurate to be able to tell, like, hey, like, so again, I'm just going to use this as an example, someone who's never done red light before, they take some test that sort of measures their mitochondrial performance. They do red light, every day for 2 months, and then they test themselves again. Is there any tests out there that would show an improvement, or is it more of a subjective thing?
I haven't seen any test that I think is amazing. And again, that might be something that I'm not aware of. Most of the stuff is a bit like a mini mental. It's a bit like anecdotal, right? I asked you a questionnaire. How has your sleep been? How has your energy been? How is it, right? And you answer these questions, and then I see a progression, right? And I created the red light for that. Again, there might be something, that again gives better data, like an actual physical blood test, but I'm not aware of it. Have you seen anything?
I also there were at A4M. There was a company that claims to have a test, but I don't I don't trust any of them.
There's like telomere length is a big one, right? But you can see because that's always an indicator. There's a lot of things, and a lot of people are doing NAD plus treatments, right? And I like to see like how has my body changed, because NAD costs thousands of dollars.
Yeah,
I mean I do it all the time. I would love to have a quantitative tests, but I think there is no such thing. I take urolithin A every day, for mitochondrial health.
Right.
Because I saw the right, influencers telling me about it. I was like, okay, can't harm me, but it's also expensive. Right. So I think it would help a lot of people if you could have a test. So hopefully somebody's listening, it's in that world, because you don't want people waste their money, and time.
Well, that's the other thing. Like if you were to actually spend, to do this amount of sauna, this amount of cold plunge, this amount of cryo, this amount of red light, you wouldn't have any time left in the day.
And that's true, and I think that's what I said earlier about the hyperbaric. I love the treatments, but costly is one thing. And some people just have the luxury to have it in the house, but it takes a lot of time. And even though you can do some work on a hyperbaric, it's an hour where you're stuck, or hour and a half ideally.
Yeah. I did hyperbaric. I was doing 90-minute sessions, and that's a long time. And if you're claustrophobic, definitely not a good.
Yeah. And again, and you had no measurable like result in the end, right?
Right. Yeah, because I was recovering from surgery, and that's why I was doing it. But again, I can't A/B test myself. I didn't recover from surgery without it, and recover surgery with it, and say, oh, gee, I healed 40% faster. Well, how do I know?
The nice thing about that is because it's been around for so long, right? And the science, like think about like you can test your blood oxygen concentration, right? But that measures like your red blood cells binding oxygen, right? In a nutshell. But with the hyperbaric, you're dissolving oxygen into like substance fluid, plasma, right? So you get more in there. So if that science is true, which we take for granted, then it makes sense, right? Because you had your surgery, you severed blood supply, and now you're still getting oxygen there to heal. So I think for surgical recovery, I think even if you may not be able to double A/B test yourself, I think it's just logical enough for somebody to follow that I would say it makes sense.
it made enough sense that I was willing to do it and spend the money.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
Well, so you're deep in the weeds on all of this stuff. What's your personal protocol? Like, what do you do? Let's say you're not traveling and you're in an average week. Like, how much cryo are you doing? How much red light are you doing? Are you doing sauna, hyperbaric? Like, what's your protocol?
So if you were talking to me right now in my home office, you would see a sauna behind me, which always throws people off because I think I sell saunas. I do not. I have a Clearlight Century 3 sauna. Again, I don't get paid by Clearlight. I love this thing. I use it all the time, at nighttime. And then, in the winter, I run outside and jump in the pool if I can, man up to do it because it's not heated. So my go-to is I try to do red light if I can, most days of the week when I'm at the office. And half the time I don't because we have staff members there and you have to be undressed and it's in an open room. So then right. But when I can, I do. And what I do almost every day is I walk into the cryo chamber. And I don't do a proper treatment. I literally just walk in. I do it for my brain performance. But we had a company in our office a few months ago called NeuroCatch. And they measure the performance of your brain, how your brain processes information. And there's a test you take. And it measures brain response. It's very cool. And so they did it before and after every one of our modalities. And it showed an improvement in each of one of them. But cryo was substantial. And it makes sense, right? You come out of a cryo chamber, you have a huge endorphin rush, right?
Yeah. You are alert.
It can be better than a cup of coffee. Yeah. And that's why midday, you'll see me usually I just walk, I have a standing desk as well, but I just walk into the cryo chamber and then come back out and I notice dramatic difference. So I do that almost every day. So cryo, red light, I do. And then we had a 2-person hyperbaric chamber in my office the other day. I went to Tennessee to a very cool gym facility now. But while that was there, we used it for meetings. And so that was actually great use of our time, right? You get to do hyperbaric, you have a little cannula in your nose, right? You have a meeting for an hour and a half. It was very productive because it has tables inside and we took notes.
Oh, wow.
So that was really neat. So, but now I don't have it anymore.
So you're
red light cryo. I do it almost all the time. If I have an injury or pull my back, my kids sometimes jump on me and unexpectedly, so I'm 47 now.
Okay.
So at once in a while I treat my back. So then I love doing PMF and cryo, for example, for acute pain.
Okay.
I feel that's a very good combination.
And you think the science behind PMF is pretty good?
Yeah, it's really funny. I feel like nobody really wants, even the companies who sell PMF devices, nobody puts out great education because it makes it a medical device. So they say it's for animal use and it's wellness for humans, right? So I think there's not a lot of great information on there because it would put it into the medical category. Once again, it's the fear of regulation FDA and claims that people kind of shy away from it.
How ironic.
It's very odd, yeah. But the company Pulse PMF, who I have a lot of respect for, I sell a competing device, but I think they are really the company in that space. I think they do great education. But again, they're also very careful on what they say. But you've seen the results. I've had so many clients talk about benefits that they had for chronic pain for years and how PMF has helped them. It's quite remarkable.
Well, so what do you think is the next modality that you think, is, might find its way into the U.S. that maybe is overseas, or just a modality that you're starting to see on the horizon?
I'm always looking, but I haven't found the thing yet. I think especially in our industry, I think that the trend goes now, people are trying to combine things into devices, and I'm not going to name any devices, but people have attempted this, and I think nobody has done it well yet, because when you combine multiple technologies, the idea is that you're stacking it, you maximize the time, right? And you do hydrogen or oxygen while you do red light and PMF and all in one.
Right.
My take on that is always, you're getting 5 things that are mediocre, because it's very hard to combine the premium or the maximum benefit of a device into a mixed device. So I think people are going to try to build that more and more. And hopefully, at some point, maybe we'll be one of those companies that designs a device that can do 3 to 5 things in one to, again, help people maximize time. But I think you have to be careful. Like you said earlier about the supplement that made me think of this.
Right.
When I sell you a pill with vitamins and I say that there's vitamin C in there, but I say proprietary, I don't have to tell you how much is in there. So it's you're not getting a dose that is actually effective. And I think that's what you have to be mindful about when you buy a device that says we do 5-in-1 things. I would say, see if you can test the efficacy of every one of them. And you would probably be disappointed at this point, but that's where I see the future going. This machine that does all in one very well.
What do you think how do you think, I have 2 questions related. The difference between a I always get the terminology mixed up. A cryo sauna versus a cryo chamber, right? One's usually electric and it's whole body, meaning like your head is obviously your whole body's inside the chamber, and then you've got the one where your head is outside of it. Is the effectiveness of those significantly different in your experience?
So cryo saunas, often, like you said, nitrogen based. There is a company that makes an electric one where your head sticks out. But the reason why the head was sticking out back then, it was just safety, right? I couldn't put you in pure nitrogen gas.
Can't breathe it, right?
Can't breathe, you would die within seconds. You would suffocate. So they had to have the head out. And so I don't like nitrogen chambers for that reason of safety in the office, but you're missing a very important part of your body. The whole point of cryo is I stimulate cold receptors all over your body to stimulate your brain, especially hypothalamus, to then have a reaction, right? And put you into this fight-flight state and so forth. And the nitrogen-powered machines are colder, but usually way colder at the bottom of your legs. And then it gets progressively warmer towards the top because nitrogen gas is heavy. And so you're missing out. So the whole industry has shifted now. When you go to CryoCon, you'll probably see no nitrogen-powered machine anymore. We had one that used a heat exchanger, so you could be in the room like a radiator type thing. So you could be in a cryo room with air, but nitrogen was running through the machine, through a radiator.
Right.
But even that is cost prohibitive. Electric machines, for example, our chamber costs about $100 a month in electric cost for a small one.
Right.
Run it 12 hours a day, 30 days a month. Right. So the nitrogen use costs you like $10 per client.
Right.
So you do the math, right? So that's the big change. But the one advantage of whole body cryo chambers is, and we focus a lot of our cold to the upper body, is vagus nerve stimulation. You see that people are putting their faces in iced water. Dave Asprey talks about it, and you can get a response, right? And so having this area stimulated is important. So I would say much superior having the whole body chambers now. Also safer and also easier.
Yeah, cheaper, more effective. It's a win-win.
But definitely nitrogen is cooler. Like I said, when we do a heat exchanger chambers where you walk in and you have nitrogen cooling the room, there's nothing like it. But again, that's not the goal. And that's, the end result is my goal. And, you can do it with an electric chamber. Yeah, it takes a couple of minutes longer, but you can get the same result.
So what's the right duration for an electric chamber? Like 5 minutes?
I would say 3 to 5.
3 to 5.
In that neighborhood. It depends on the person. If I have a very small client, they might cool down very fast versus a bodybuilder or a wrestler,
Right.
So it depends, but it's usually 3 to 5 minutes. The goal is, again, dropping skin temperature. The best would be to measure your skin temperature before you exit in the chamber, to see, did I drop your skin temperature down by about, 40, 50 degrees? Because then I know I got the stimulation.
What about cold plunge versus a cryotherapy? How are they different or the same?
Different and the same, both actually, right? So both hypercool the body. I think the cold plunge is more effective and not more efficient, I should say, because it's instant, right? I put you in there, cold water touching, you have direct contact with the skin, much better medium to take heat away from the body. It's phenomenal. If you stay in a cold plunge long time, of course, it cools deep into the muscle. That's what cryo doesn't do. Cryo stimulates the outer layer of your skin and stimulates your brain, but you could, after this, jump up and go running. If you ever came out of a cold plunge, I'm not sure if you do them or not.
Yeah.
Try to jump up and run right up. You can't, you're going to tear muscle, right? You can't move because there's no circulation. It takes a while to get back. So there's a much deeper cooling in a cold plunge. From a business perspective, the problem is cold plunges is the hygiene aspect, right? And the truth is most people can't do a cold plunge. I have a lot of friends who do cold plunge, but, I have a lot of friends also who have a cold plunge who never use it, and again, for me to jump into my unheated pool in California, mind you, right, which is like, 60 degrees water, it's tough. And I think it's just much easier to do cryo. It's more accessible for anyone. You can have a, child walk into a cryo chamber or a senior citizen, but the ice bath is just much more challenging.
Yeah. No, the cold plunge is brutal. And the other thing I've been reading too is apparently for women, like if you get a temperature below 55 degrees, like it's actually not great for them, I think, from a hormonal level. I think it has to do with the cortisol release or something like that.
Yeah, I've seen similar things. Yeah. There's side effects that you don't get with cryo.
Right. Well, so let's look at it from a business standpoint. You got your MBA, you've been a serial entrepreneur, it sounds like. Maybe talk a little bit about how you think about business. I know last year, I think you won the CINA Customer Service Award. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I think that's actually the hardest thing. Like customer service is the one place that most businesses, they just suck at.
Yeah,
that's true. Maybe talk a little bit about your philosophy around that and just maybe your philosophy just about business more broadly.
I think it started with us being in the shoes of not having any customer service. So I've seen that side of the equation firsthand, right? So that's why I think part of that is like, I take it very personally. If somebody calls me, and luckily I have a service team answering the phone now, but for the longest time, it was me directly answering for years. And, somebody on a Friday calls me, hey, my machine is down. I can't get it to cool down. We have people booked all weekend. I would take it very personally. It would stress me out a lot. I always joke about half my gray hairs from those days, and the other half is my 3 kids. And
the wife's not responsible for any of that.
Not at all. Yeah, very blessed. But no, it's having been in the shoes and knowing the frustration and how it can hurt your business too when your stuff doesn't work. And that's why we take it very seriously, and we usually try to go above and beyond. And we do things like, if you buy a machine, we create a WhatsApp group, and you have your salesperson and the technical team on these groups. So if you're in your office and you're like, hey, something doesn't work, you text that group and somebody gets back to you pretty much immediately. And that's just because I want there to be communication, and I want people not to have stranded, because every machine will have a problem at some point, and we're trying to make it as easy as possible to solve this. But it comes from a place where I was on the receiving end of terrible service and just wanted to do it differently. And you're right, the industry is often, people buy a machine, there's a lot of excitement, a lot of promises, and then you get the machine, and then that's the end of the story. And, our biggest thing was building a network across the country of technicians for that reason, right? We have people in almost every state so that I can respond fast,
How about from a business model standpoint? Like, as an equipment manufacturer, it's a very transactional. People don't buy, a cryo machine every year, right? They're gonna, I guess if they're opening multiple locations, maybe they would, but for the most part, it's, they buy it, and they have it for a number of years. That strikes me like a more challenging business model, because there's not like a recurring revenue aspect of it. Maybe how do you think of it as a business? And, are there things you're doing in your business that maybe can add a recurring revenue aspect to the business model, but that also is beneficial to the client?
I mean, the one thing that, what pops in mind there is, of course, having service plans of sort, right? That's recurring revenue. I have until now shied away from it. I have some franchises now that we work with that ask me to do it just for peace of mind. They want something like this. Until now, I've told people, like, I've done the math with our equipment. If I charge you monthly, I would make a profit. So actually, I purposely didn't do it. But obviously, it's an interesting thing, for anybody trying to get into the equipment world, there's a great way to make money, right? It just has to be done right. Because what I see some companies do is they sell you a very expensive product. It's kind of, I think of it, the printer and the ink. Right, you buy a printer for cheap, and then the ink is expensive over time, and that's the recurring model.
Right,
businesses get. In our industry, the problem is oftentimes the printer is very expensive, and then the ink is also very expensive. So there's a double dipping happening there.
Yeah,
and I think that's where people get frustrated. Clients get frustrated. But other than that, no. I mean, we get a lot of referrals. Like, when you take care of your customers, that customer might not buy something else.
Right.
But by having this customer be an advocate, because face it, if you have a wellness center somewhere, you're going to have thousands of people come through your doors. And out of those, there's going to be a handful who see what you do, or who actually shop you because they plan to do the same thing. And, if you have something positive to say about your experience with this vendor, people will come to you. And I think we get a lot of referral business, probably more than we get from Google ads that we spend a ton of money on.
Really?
So, and I think that's yes, there's one business owner may have only bought 1 or 2 machines over the years. But also in the future, in 5 years, and maybe 7 years, when they want to get something new, a lot of them come back. We've maintained relationships with customers for like 12 plus years.
Well, what's the one piece of equipment or modality that maybe you thought was going to make a bigger splash than it did, and you were surprised it kind of fizzled out?
I think for us, it was it didn't surprise me as much so, but the localized cryotherapy. We invented the cryofacial back in the day, right? But at some point, one of the franchises told us they don't want to use it anymore. And I was kind of, I was a bit hurt. I was like, hey, this was a nice little recurring revenue. Every franchise would buy this localized machine. But it didn't make sense. It was too labor intensive. Everybody's moving towards touchless wellness, where you don't need an operator. There's a famous hotel we work with, also the Caroline Hotel in Miami. And the Caroline Hotel is an 8,000 square foot touchless wellness spa. They have all these modalities. You're in book, and you just have a guide walking you through, and then you use all these different machines. But there's no operators. Very interesting model. And so that's where the industry is going. And a cryofacial or localized cryotherapy session, how much can you really charge? Maybe $25, $30, but your technician will make that in an hour. right? So it's not a good revenue. I think cryotherapy localized is beneficial. And if you can combine it, for example, with PT or stretching or cupping, it's powerful. But that's one where, all of a sudden the demand dropped quite a bit because people wanted something that's a bit more hands-off, like a red light bed where you go and push a button and it starts by itself. A cryo chamber, technically, you just walk in and walk out.
Right.
There's nobody needed to actually physically do the labor.
So how big of an organization, is NeoScience? Like what's your, head count and, what are your growth plans?
I mean, the headcount's constantly growing. Actually, we're just hiring right now again. So we have a core team of 11 people right now. And then we have 24 regular technicians we work with, but those are not on payroll.
Sure.
I always laugh when I hear companies say, we have 2,400 technicians. I'm like, I want to see your payroll.
Yeah.
And then we have a network of about 75 technicians across the country that we use, that we know, have a relationship with. So that's it. And I know, but our growth, projection right now, it's exponentially growing. We've signed up 5 franchises now, like I said earlier. We're doing a very cool project right now in Doha in Qatar with Virgin Active. So they're doing a test with a NeoNightbed and a NeoLuna Cryo to see it in there, because they are now going towards this, again, the big fourth space people talk about, right? The third space was your gym, and fourth space is like this place where you work and have your recovery, wellness modalities, healthy food, gym, all in one. And Virgin is doing this. Several of our clients are doing this too. There's a company called Iconics we work with. It's a gym. They're building beautiful facilities in Tennessee right now. But the trend goes towards that. So we get to be part of that equation. And I see that happening more and more and more. And so us plugging into these big organizations is exciting because, I always joke about this. I don't know where my next customer comes from, right? In this business. Like, yes, you might be in a trajectory, but you don't know, right? About the next person coming. You see trends, but there's no guarantee. I like franchise for that reason, because it's more predictable. So that's what I see for NeoScience. I mean, I think we're going to get way more devices out there. We're going to probably triple this year from last year.
Triple, wow.
At least double. But I mean, in January we had triple the revenue already. So it's getting in the right direction.
And now are you, was the company self-funded, or did you raise capital, or?
And it's self-funded.
Okay.
And I mean, the business model was very simple from the beginning, right? A customer would pay us a deposit that would help us offset the upfront cost to manufacture.
Right.
And then they would have to pay the final before delivery. So we would not be deeply in the hole. There would be a certain amount of time, right? And slightly, but we wouldn't just, build a ton of equipment, take out a big loan, and then hope to sell the equipment.
Got it.
And so now we're at a point, though, because it's growing so fast, now of every device, we're building 10 to 15 at any given point. As soon as one gets sold, another one goes to production. So we're constantly building. And it's very fun. I mean, like I say, I read the book The Tipping Point a few years ago. And I was wondering, when is this happening? And I think, we just started tipping. So it's really a fun time.
And is this kind of the thing where, you're going to ride this for as long as you can, or is there a plan to exit at some point, 5-10 years down the road, or, merge, do M&A, is there any thoughts along those lines?
I think selling is not really on the horizon right now. I mean, my 6-year-old told me last year that when I die, he'll take over. Also, a big conversation to have. I told him it's a bit early for that.
For both of you.
Yeah, both of us. But, I said that there's so much left to do, and I think it's such a huge industry, and I think there's other areas where we can help improve, let it be devices or service. I think really, we can help a lot of more business owners, with their businesses. So we just getting started, in my opinion. So there's no selling the business on the horizon. I wouldn't know what to do with myself, to be honest. What I do is probably one of my biggest hobbies also, so I don't consider it work.
That's always nice.
I wake up excited Monday morning. It sounds corny, but it's true. Like, I enjoy what I do, and I think I wouldn't know what to do with it. If I sold this company, I'd probably build another one just like it.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I've had a couple of friends that had some, 8 and 9 figure exits, after running businesses for a decade plus, and they don't know what to do with themselves. I feel like they're practically suicidal because they don't have anything that's they're passionate about. Well, it comes through that you really are passionate about it. You really care about your clients and customers, and not everybody does. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, I say it's great to be in this position. I say I love what I do, and it's exciting too when we get to try to improve. We're constantly working, improving things. Even though I think like our device, for example, right now, that's how it is. We always try to think, okay, what else can we add? And then one philosophy I have is like, for everybody listening who possibly has a machine from us, anybody who bought a machine, if we make an upgrade, and for next generation, you can also add it to your machine. Not for free, obviously, but we always want to feel that people don't feel like left behind. Like when I buy an iPhone, it's always the wrong time.
Right.
It's a new one coming next week.
Yeah.
And so we try to do that.
Right. So backward compatibility, basically.
Yeah, especially for the light and the cryo. Right? Because certain things will never change, and everything else that gets upgraded over time, we can upgrade.
So what's your newest piece of equipment? That's the one that you most recently introduced to the market.
The Neo Lunar Cryo. It's the newest one. We launched it at CryoCon officially, and it's been very well received. It's really fun. But even for Neolight, we just came up with a red light panel for the hair. That gets opposite of the foot fan. So it's a typical tanning bed, looking light bed, foot fan on one side to cool the body, on the other side a red light. And other people have done this before. But I saw this and customers liked it, and it does make sense to have even more exposure. Plus, we also work with the Alzheimer's Centers of America. They wanted to have more red on the head, and so we designed more. So often we don't come out with the innovations, but we try to obviously, can we use it and can we make it better potentially?
Right.
That's kind of the whole approach.
Got it. Well, Robin, I really appreciate you coming on and talking about what you're doing. Where can people find you and what you and NeoScience are up to?
So we are in Glendale in California. I always encourage people to visit our showroom and hang out and just play. Basically, come over and use all the modalities. But otherwise, it's neoscience.com, neoscience.com. And then our Instagram is actually, I think, the most fun to watch because you see actual videos of devices, of customers that we repost. And it's neo_science. So that's a fun place to start to learn more about us.
Cool. Well, Robin, thanks again for coming on.
Thanks for having me.